Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
May the Force be with us.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
Ojaba. Why does she get a blaster and I don't? Ojaba.
It never fails that I've got a line of thinking. I've got an idea for how I'm going to start the show, and then I hear the intro, and something else kind of pops into my head. It happens every single time. Welcome to my nerd world and the Star Wars podcast, episode 121. Holy cow! I am your host, Jon Justice, and I'm glad that we are here again to talk about Star Wars. One of the best things ever, right? Lots to get to on the show today. Let me share with you my thought real quick that popped into my head, because I was planning on talking about this anyhow. But I'll leave out spoilers. I will stay spoiler-free, so don't freak out. I'm going to talk about Avengers Infinity War here for just a brief moment. Seen it twice. I really love the movie. Love the movie for one of the same reasons that I loved The Last Jedi, even though I like The Last Jedi quite a bit more. I mean, and I'll get to more of this in a second. But I loved Infinity War because it defied expectations. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And I like movies that do that. And it's exciting for me to be a fan of these genres and to see these filmmakers in these massive motion pictures that are taking arguably risks. Now, I would say that Star Wars The Last Jedi has many more risks taken than Avengers Infinity War. And I won't get any further than that. But I am very much looking forward to seeing the part 2 of Infinity War. But you know, I love The Last Jedi because it did defy expectations. And one of the things that popped up, because that's what I was going to mention originally, but the thing that popped up during the intro was that I appreciate The Last Jedi because it is such a different film. It just has a different look and feel. It is not necessarily... It's not your run-of-the-mill Star Wars movie. I mean, Empire Strikes Back wasn't either. And I really love it for that. Daisy Ridley, in one of the first, or in the behind-the-scenes video for The Last Jedi, made a comment that the movie kind of stands on its own. And it does. It does fit into the broader picture of Star Wars, but, you know, I mean, I've watched The Force Awakens and then immediately watched The Last Jedi, and it's cool to do that, but they are two very different films. And The Force Awakens is more of a doing that thing with my finger, sort of mainstream, right, movie, blockbuster, and The Last Jedi isn't. And it defies expectations, and it is very, very unique. And I've mentioned several times, not just in the way it was written, but the way it was shot, and even the way the filter that's used for the movie itself. It has a very sort of classic, timeless feel to it. You can't look at an Avengers movie, a Marvel movie, in the same way. You know, the Marvel movies all pretty much have sort of the same type of palette, and they all look very, very similar in that way. And it's not a criticism of the other films. It is a pointing out of how unique The Last Jedi is. And so that popped into my head when I was listening to the intro. It seems to happen every single time. All right, so on the show this week, we are going to talk a little bit more about Infinity War, just because there's something happening with it unrelated to details of the movie. I won't go into any of the details of the movie. I had a couple of different items in terms of topics to get to. I think I'm going to skip over them. I'm going to cover a couple of news items, and then we're going to dive right into listener feedback. I have some correcting to do from last week. Oh, I rubbed some of you guys the wrong way. Look, it's a byproduct, and we'll get into it. It's a byproduct of me sitting down doing the show with a rough set of notes and not articulating a particular point as well as I could have, which lent itself to some confusion. I'm fine with people disagreeing with me. Don't misunderstand. I think that's great. I love the listeners to this show and all the feedback that I get. I mean, it really it's awesome. It's absolutely amazing, and it means a lot to me. This is my passion and my labor of love. I don't get paid for doing this like I do my weekly job, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate when you guys write in. And so even when you disagree with me, I think it's cool. It's better to do that. It's no fun if you listen to a show and you agree with the host, all the time. You got to have, even if it's just like 99%. Just agree with me like 99%, and you can just do that 1%. I think we got more than 1% last week, but we'll get into a big portion of the show today. Will be listener feedback. All right, so let's go ahead and just dive into one quick thing in regards to Infinity War and a little bit of commentary about it.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Yeah, that awakening is the fandom and the inability for people to keep from commenting on things. I worded that wonky. Everybody's got an opinion. That's just the reality. Everybody's got an opinion, and that's totally cool. That's great. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. I think we can all agree, especially if I know you, the listener to this show, that where that opinion crosses the line is when individuals don't accept your personal opinion about something and tell you all the reasons why you're wrong. Last Jedi falls into that category, right? That's the problem that I had with so many people. It wasn't that people didn't like it. It's that people didn't like it, and then they would go and chastise those that did like it and tell those individuals why they're wrong. Well, no, those people are wrong. Because art is subjective. Movies and music, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And if somebody doesn't like The Last Jedi, I'm cool with that. That's, it's a bummer for you because it's an amazing film. There's backlash with Infinity War. And people are very upset. And this isn't anything new. Okay, this happens for all films. Especially, and I say all films, but I mean the big blockbusters that grab the public's attention, right? I mean, Infinity War made all the money in the world, right? I mean, it beat The Force Awakens for biggest opening weekend. And good for Disney, man. The more money Disney makes, the more quality Star Wars movies we're going to get because the bigger budgets they're going to have. I think it's spectacular. This is great for Star Wars, and I have no problem that it beat The Force Awakens, and it probably should. Infinity War is an incredible feat when you consider the culmination of 10 years and 18 movies leading up to one singular film, and a good film at that. Not my favorite Marvel movie by any stretch, but it is a very, very good film. But there's backlash with it. And the reason why there's backlash is because people have the ability now to go online and express their views and opinions, and unfortunately, they get taken seriously. Twitter's been around for a while. Facebook has been around for a while. But now, the mainstream media has caught on to, mainstream media and also pop culture mainstream media, okay? They've realized that by perpetuating the negativity and the division, they can get more clicks. Now, granted, it's still incumbent upon us to click and read those articles and watch those YouTube videos for them to have any power, right? But a lot of us can't help ourselves. But the truth is, people have been commenting since Twitter started. People have been commenting since Facebook started. I don't believe as a society we have quite figured out how to work through when people comment on Twitter and Facebook and how we react towards it. I know that I personally struggle with that because I've got this weekly radio show that I do as my full-time job Monday through Friday, and a lot of people comment on Twitter. I utilize the mute and block function quite often on Twitter. Why? It's not that I don't want to hear different viewpoints, but I have my standards. And when you're going to attack and not just share a different viewpoint and potentially have a conversation and not agree to disagree, then I have no time for you. Unfortunately, that's not the way that the fandom handles it a lot of times. And unfortunately, a lot of this division gets perpetuated because outlets know they can get clicks for it. And so this is just the new reality now that we're in. Thankfully, we do have movies like The Last Jedi and Infinity War that do take big risks. So it seems thus far, the creative element making this content is not reacting to social networking and media. And I hope they continue to do so. I hope they continue to ignore that. I think The Last Jedi benefited greatly from Rian Johnson writing the film, writing the screenplay, while The Force Awakens was being shot. I think that dynamic, the fact that Rian Johnson was writing the script before he actually saw a finished product, benefited The Last Jedi greatly. I'm sure there are those in the fandom that would disagree with me and say maybe he should have watched The Last Jedi first. The Force Awakens first before making The Last Jedi so that it meshed a little bit. And I'm just making up quasi-arguments. But for me, I love the fact that Rian Johnson wrote this story based off of a story that he read and just sort of seeing dailies. I think the movie really benefits in that way. It still continues the story of these characters that we love, but it also does stand apart because of that. I mean, even on a subconscious level, Rian Johnson didn't have sort of a point of reference in his mind where he could even make a subconscious decision that might lend itself to a different shot in the film to have it feel more like The Force Awakens. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. I just like the fact that it's benefiting from a lack of complete knowledge of The Force Awakens, which, in my opinion, created a better opportunity for original content, an original screenplay and an original film, rather than something that was trying to replicate what came before it. Because that's kind of what The Force Awakens fell into. Very intentional. Talked about it many times. It was intentional that J.J. Abrams did that. And I do love The Force Awakens for that fact. That if I want to sit down and just kind of watch a Star Wars movie and check out, I can put The Force Awakens in and check out. And it's great. You know, I can watch that film and sort of satisfy my Star Wars gland. Right? That comes off of Disney gland. We used to, when I lived in Southern California, we'd have to go and, take care of our Disneyland. Anyway, I can kind of satisfy my desire to visit the Star Wars universe without having to watch all the original trilogy. I can just watch The Force Awakens. Not that I'm saying it's a complete rehash. I'm just saying it has similarities that you can pull from and kind of get it all encompassing in that film. You know, and Infinity War takes a bunch of risks too. So currently, as of right now, you don't see the movie studios that are adjusting anything based off of the backlash. I do chuckle over the fact that Infinity War is dealing with a lot of controversy right now from the fandom. And again, I just feel as if this is the world that we live in right now. We're just going to have to expect this for every single film and then decide as fans how we're going to react to it. The way that I handle it now is that when somebody comments to me or I read something on Twitter that I don't particularly care for, I think it's obnoxious, I don't respond to it, right? I respond to people that respond to me. I don't generally respond, certainly not with anything negative. I may respond with something positive to somebody's tweet and comment. But I equate it to meeting somebody on the street. If somebody was standing on a street corner with a sign saying The Last Jedi sucked and Rian Johnson's a horrible director, I would ignore that person. Why would I take the individual who wrote the same thing on Twitter any more seriously? Or a person that walked up to me and got into my face and said Star Wars was stupid. I'd ignore that person. I'd walk away. I said, you're stupid. You're depriving yourself of amazing entertainment. What is your problem? All right. So, now that that's out of the way, let's talk a little Han Solo. I have audio that I'm going to share with you. A featurette that dropped over the weekend, Sunday, actually. Featurette for the film. And I'm going to play you the audio, comment a bit on it, and then we'll talk a little bit about the online ticket sales. And then we'll get into the announcement of the new Dave Filoni animated series and your listener feedback. But first, enjoy this.
The Star Wars universe that we see in Solo was different from anything else that we've seen in any previous Star Wars movies. The Empire controls everything. Everyone is struggling to survive, but we discover this incredibly free spirit.
We're meeting Han right before he becomes the Han that we know. You end up getting to see how this guy got to be the way he is. It's all part of this great expansion of the Han Solo world.
It's a rite of passage.
You look good.
The tests he needs to face, the challenges he has to endure to become
Han Solo.
Those first encounters with Chewbacca.
You're gonna need a nickname, because I ain't saying that every time.
With the Millennium Falcon. With Lando Calrissian.
Did you win your ship playing cards?
I like this kid.
They're in this movie.
I'm a driver. A great pilot.
He's the most exciting character in the saga for me. You don't know what he's gonna do.
I'm a terrible person.
He's reckless.
He does these stupid things that should never work. And they do.
High five!
And he does it with bravado. I might be the only person who knows what you really are.
What's that?
Disney and Lucasfilm are damn geniuses. I can't say it enough. I am so excited for this film in a way that I never thought I would be excited for Solo: A Star Wars Story. Every single clip that they put out just gets better and better and better. This movie, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. This movie looks fantastic. I am so excited, and I'm excited for the fact that I'm excited, because I didn't think that I was going to be this excited for this movie. We're hearing the tickets go on sale Friday for May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. And man, I'm so hyped for this movie now. I am so sold on Alden Ehrenreich, and I want to see all these characters. And I'll equate it to Rogue One. I loved Rogue One. Rogue One's a great movie. I really enjoy watching that movie. But I'm already desperate to see the characters in Solo and already feel a bit of a connection to them in a way that I didn't feel for any of the characters in Solo. There seems to be for some reason, and I can't even put my finger on it yet, there's a heart and a soul to this movie that I'm sensing is going to carry it to great success, even though it's not a part of the saga films, even though it doesn't have the importance of the mythology that we also love, that we've spent so much time discussing and talking about and writing about when it comes to the Force and The Last Jedi and Rey and Kylo, right? I mean, we're getting our cake and we're eating it too. And for me, this is totally just a total personal item of note. The speeder that Solo drives on Corellia at the beginning, we believe it's the beginning of the film when he's like a teenager, like 18 years old. I've got two different toy versions of it. I got the full version. It's sitting over here on my shelf next to Rey's speeder. I need to get Luke's land speeder up in there. I'm kind of going to go with like a speeder motif. But I've already got Kira from Corellia in there, so kind of replicating the shot we've seen in the trailer of the two of them driving around together. I also have the diecast version. I'm holding it in my hand right now, the smaller one, right? The Hot Wheels. In that clip that I just played, there's a scene, and I'm gonna guess it's probably the beginning of the movie, but it's nighttime on Corellia, and you get this overhead shot of the city and Han driving down this street. And then you get this up-close shot of him just like cruising in his convertible, in this blue speeder. And I can relate to that. The shot that you see in that featurette and what we've seen in the trailer, it reminds me of me when I'm driving around my car. I have a 2014 Kia Forte Coupe, a two-door. Got it when it was brand new. I take care of it, keep it clean. I for as ridiculous as it sounds, I love that car. I absolutely love that car. The blue is almost identical to Solo's blue on his speeder. And I saw him in that shot just cruising just looking like he doesn't have a care in the world. And I go, man, I can totally relate to that. I mean, instantly, I was just connected to this character. And Lando, you heard some lines from Lando in there. They keep just giving us a little bit more and a little bit more. They haven't given hardly anything away from for the movie at all. And I'm so totally excited for this movie. I can't wait to purchase my tickets, and I can't wait to get to the theater to see this film. It's going to be just so exciting. I think it's going to be absolutely great.
This is not going to go the way you think.
We're getting an animated show that's not going the way that I thought. So it was announced at the end of last week. Star Wars Resistance, an animated series directed by Dave Filoni that'll feature characters like Poe Dameron and Captain Phasma. It'll be voiced by those characters, by Oscar Isaac and Gwendolyn Christie, along with a whole cast of characters. And it's going to be done in anime style. I was at first disappointed when I heard that, but then I saw somebody comment online, positivity from online. I saw somebody comment online that it's probably going to be very much in the same vein as Batman Ninja. And I'd never seen any footage of Batman Ninja. So I went onto YouTube and I watched, 3 or 4 minutes of Batman Ninja. And if that's what it's going to look like, then I am totally on board. There's a richness that style anime, if that's what they're going for, can bring, and a level of detail that is even better than your normal 3D animation. If I had one complaint over Rebels, it was the fact that they didn't have the budget that they had for the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is just spectacular to look at. And while I do like Rebels, it just didn't have the level of detail that the Clone Wars had. If they're going with the animated style in the same vein as Batman Ninja, then I think we have something really exciting to look forward to in an era that I really want to see stories told in, leading up to The Force Awakens. I'm so glad that we're out of the original trilogy era and we're getting into more of this modern era. That gets me really, really excited. I'm fine if we go back in time, and we probably will in one of the other TV shows or in the other movies that they are, going to be creating. I'm sure we're going to be looking back and not going too far forward. But I'm glad that the next bit of content that starts in the fall, no less. They've already announced. This has already been. I imagine the first season's probably already done. And just from the little bit of images that we saw on the logo, it looks really cool. So I didn't think I was going to be that excited for it, but I really am now because it looks like it's going to be something that will be very different and unique, but also provide an opportunity to perhaps give us a level of detail in the animation that could really lend itself to the Star Wars universe. And I just have all the faith and trust in Lucasfilm and Dave Filoni to deliver something really unique and different. And so I'm excited to see what this ends up looking like, and the fact that after Solo's done, in a matter of a couple of months, we'll have some new Star Wars content, since it's going to be kind of quiet for a year and a half after Solo comes out until Episode 9 later next year.
Let the past die. Kill it. If you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
All right, so it's time to get into listener feedback. And there's a lot of it. As a matter of fact, there's so much that I need to keep it at the normal length this week. So we'll get it. I'll get through as many as I can, and whatever I don't get to, we'll cover again next week. And I got a couple of really lengthy emails that are going to deserve to have some time spent on them. So what I'll start out doing is I'm going to dive into some of the controversy from what happened last week and a comment that I made. In talking about The Last Jedi, I made sort of an offhanded remark when it comes to Kylo and Rey, Ben and Rey, and what J.J. Abrams will or won't do in Episode 9. Obviously, I don't know. But I made a comment that when it comes to the romance part of Reylo, that J.J. probably won't even go there. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to start reading back some of the emails that we got, and I'll respond in kind, going through your feedback rather than sort of defending myself up front and clarifying. I'll clarify as I work through this. And so we'll start off with Amanda, friend of the show, says the same here, writes this. Oh, John, friend, have you succumbed to the ways of Screen Rant? That love cannot work in Star Wars? This hurts. But I just want to say that you are totally entitled to your opinion, and no one but Abrams and the script holders know. But nonetheless, here I go, like a mad Reylo in the wilderness. Abrams was the first to ship Reylo. If you doubt it, listen to the commentary. I know. And he makes plenty of allusions to this. He calls Kylo a prince. This is true. When Kylo takes off his mask and shows his face to Rey for the first time, he calls Daisy a princess. Yep, Cinderella, going to the ball as she enters Maz's castle. And just think of that. Why else would the legacy saber call to her show her the Skywalker story? Could it be that she is meant to be a Skywalker? As in, put a right on it, tie it with a Force red string, right? Okay. And she bears something extremely important from the Oracle, Maz. She hears the belonging you seek isn't behind you, it's ahead. Okay? And I'm skipping through a couple of portions of this, Amanda, just for the sake of time. If you or someone is worried about severing the connection at the end of The Last Jedi, as a woman, let me extend hope to all mankind. If a woman permanently severed a connection after a guy said something offensive and has a rant, the world's population would cease to exist. Women are by no means innocent of any of these negative things either. But Rey shutting the door doesn't mean she shut it permanently. Remember, this is a Force bond. Plus, in the novel, it states that Rey left Kylo alive for two reasons. Jakku taught her two things: how to wait patiently and how to fix broken things. I just listened to the audiobook, and you know what they played at the moment, Across the Stars. Here's to that, and I'm going to get to all of her comments here in just a moment. But to the Across the Stars, that's a tough one for me, just because I know how the production works, and that I wouldn't read too much into that. I'm not pushing back, but I wouldn't read too much into that, because that could just be somebody in the production part of things and their interpretation of what was the best thing to go and put there in that moment and what fit. So yeah, it seems pretty obvious they would play Across the Stars, but I don't think necessarily that's something that they would even go and double check with, say, Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams, who's writing the next film. Okay. As far as Disney is concerned, let me see here. All right, let me stop here real quick. Let me address a couple of things. Specifically about the comment that I made about J.J. Abrams. And I'll go in reverse. When it comes to the Force bond at the end of The Last Jedi, my point being about that was, if there is a time jump, and I know there's another listener to the show, Anna, who discusses this, but I'll go ahead and address it now. My point on the Force bond and a jump in time is, this is my opinion of what I think would and wouldn't work. This is not necessarily what I want to see happen, okay? If we've got, say, a time jump of 3 years from The Last Jedi to Episode 9, and there's been no Force connection in that 3-year period between Kylo and Rey, then I would imagine it would take a bit of time to reestablish that with the audience, meaning there's been a big distance here in time. You'd have to assume that Kylo Ren has probably wreaked quite a bit of havoc in the galaxy in that period of time, to which case, if there hasn't been any connection between between Rey and Kylo Ren, then she would have to be aware of what he was doing in the galaxy and probably even have a bigger negative opinion of him. Okay. If they do keep the Force connection, but it takes place in a time jump that we're not aware of as an audience, I don't think they'll do that, right? I can't imagine the crawl stating Rey and Kylo have been force connecting for the past 3 years. I just don't see that happening either. So, to my point about J.J. Abrams, obviously I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the best course of action is to do between these two characters. My larger point, when I made my sort of flippant, doing that thing with my fingers comment, was that even if J.J. Abrams doesn't go there, and for the sake of argument, we have this conflict between the newly formed rebels and the First Order that culminates in a showdown between Rey and Kylo, and that's the first time that they end up meeting face-to-face again since the last time they saw each other, right? We'll always have The Last Jedi. That was the larger point that I was trying to make. I think that Rian Johnson touched upon the romance part of Rey and Kylo in a way that J.J. Abrams potentially wouldn't. I don't see that being replicated in 9 because we got it in 7. That's not to say they can't join forces at the end. That's not to say that they can't still feel a connection in the film. That is just to say that when it comes to the romance, the potential romance aspect of these two characters in episode 9, I don't see it being replicated in the same fashion that Rian Johnson did it in 7, because he did do it in 7. Does that, I hope that makes more sense. I know some of you might disagree with me, but I can't imagine going into 9 and then suddenly we're going to have these force bonds and they're going to be connecting again and we're going to have that emotional moment, you know, like we had in 7. No, we already got that. I think that J.J. Abrams is going to do a really good job handling these characters. And I'm not allowing myself, I'm not saying anybody here is, but I'm not allowing myself to get locked into the headcanon about what he will and won't do, or what I ultimately desire that he does. Right? I'm really kind of open. Because as I said, we'll always have The Last Jedi. And if I ever want to see that romantic aspect of the connection between these two characters, I can always go back to that movie. And much in the same way when it comes to, say, The Empire Strikes Back, right? And Han and Leia. You can always go back and watch the scene of the Millennium Falcon. My hands are dirty. My hands are too dirty too. What are you afraid of? Afraid you're trembling, right? We'll always have that as well. So we're all entitled to our opinions. We all have different views of what we think is going to happen. I firmly believe that romance can work in Star Wars. I think that Rian Johnson's trilogy, whatever it is probably going to lean really heavy on the personal relationships and individuals and probably some type of romantic angle of characters. That's just what he does. He's done that in some way, shape, or form in all of his films. And J.J. Abrams has to a certain extent too, but he does it way more surface level. Think about the Star Trek movies and Spock, right? And Zoe Saldana's character. You know, I mean, they had it there. But I could see it more like in that vein. All right, I'm just talking circles now, right? I hope that clears that up a little tiny bit. I didn't mean to ruffle so many feathers. All right, let me get back to some of the comments here. And Amanda, I'm going to save some of what you have written here for a latter time so we can get to a couple of other items, because I know she's written here quite a bit, and I've got lots to talk about. All right, La Bella Donna writes this. The comparison is supposed to offend shippers of Reylo. This is when I made a comment about how I believe that people had a hard time when it came to The Last Jedi, and they compared it to Twilight. And I know some people online were like, what? It's nothing like Twilight. I didn't say it was anything like Twilight. I'm saying there was parts of the fandom that compared it to Twilight, because there's a lot of dudes out there that aren't in touch with their own personal emotions, that can't handle it when there's something emotional happening between a man and a woman on a screen. The comparison is supposed to offend Reylo shippers. Just because there is a lot of shippers from Tumblr, everyone assumes these people are all teenagers and that they ship Twilight romance. I personally love the Reylo angle. All right, let's move on to a lot of comments from Anna. Anna Carreno. If I said that wrong, I apologize. Only thing I would disagree with is that Reylo is done and JJ won't even touch that. Are you kidding me? JJ was the creator of Reylo. And even Ryan said that he took every hint from TFA to develop their scenes in The Last Jedi. Ryan also said that he can't wait to see what happens to those 2 in 9. So yeah, it's far from over. It's far from over. It's only the beginning. Ryan set it up perfectly for them to have a romance in 9. Yes, they are separated now, but their bond is still going strong even after Snoke died. So I bet JJ will be using those connections once again. Also, the novelization proves they won't have feelings for proves they both have feelings for one another. So yes, there will be romance, and it's happening at some point in 9. Cannot wait. And then she also writes, even with a time jump, it doesn't matter if the Force bond is still strong between them. They can keep having intimate moments that will sustain the romance, which will eventually happen at some point in 9. Their love story will be at the heart of this trilogy when all is said and done. Okay, I am going to disagree with that a little bit. And I won't go over the points that I made before. I do think that the fact that these two characters are attracted to one another is absolutely, in some way, shape, or form, going to play itself out in Episode 9. I just don't believe it's going to be a full-on romance or close to what we got in Episode 8. That's my only point. What I would think would happen is we have whatever the story is, but when we get to the last half of the movie, the last third of the movie, the last quarter of the movie, when they have to go face off with one another, neither of them are going to be able to bring themselves to kill the other person. And there's probably going to be some other threat. So yeah, I do think that love will eventually conquer all, and these two characters will be at the heart of it. I just don't anticipate that 9 is going to have a romantic connection between these two that lasts throughout the film, because again, we got that in Episode 8, right? Okay. Let's get over to J.O.B. Writes this. Oh, this is kind of an oddball question off to the side, but we'll go ahead and answer it anyways. If Rey's parents sold her to Unkar Plutt, why was she on her own? I would think if he owned her, she would have been more of a slave versus free and working to survive. I haven't seen that clarified, and if somebody wants to correct me by some clarification, or wants to comment and clarify and clear that up, feel free to reach out to me. My understanding was, one, assuming that Kylo was telling the truth, and I think what they're alluding to here is that Kylo was lying to Rey. But assuming that's the truth, she can't really go anywhere, so I don't think slave is the proper term. He may have sold her off to Unkar Plutt just for safekeeping, knowing that she would just end up being a scavenger, but she couldn't really leave anywhere. I mean, look, if she left the planet, she left the planet. And I know there's a cut scene where Unkar Plutt was going after her, but I thought that was more about getting the Millennium Falcon back than it was getting Rey back. So if the point of the comment was to try and justify Kylo lying to Rey, it's possible. I tend to believe that he was telling the truth. But if that's the case, there's plenty of middle ground there where she still could have been sold to Unkar Plutt but wasn't technically a slave. And actually, I want to say I've got that journal that was released when The Force Awakens came out, and I've read that. I want to say there was some alluding to what her status was with Unkar Plutt in that. So if somebody wants to drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, please feel free to do so if you can sort of clarify that particular comment. All right, Miss Suki 777 says this. I have daughters, so I've seen the Twilight films, and I see no comparison between the Rey and Kylo thing. Am I the only one? How do you think the trilogy will end? Will everybody make it out alive? All right, so again, to the Twilight comment, that was specifically made from individuals that try to pair the two together because they're trying to criticize individuals that like the romance in that. I don't believe that there's any similarity, except for the fact that we're talking about a romance. So I just brought it up as a point of criticism that people unjustly use. In terms of, how the movie's going to end, like I said a moment ago, I think that there's going to be another face-off between Rey and Kylo, but they're not going to be able to... They're going to realize that they're better together, and that's what the galaxy needs, than they are apart. I envision a time jump and there being another bad guy out there. Maybe Kylo has decided to take on an apprentice who's reckless and is a threat even bigger than Kylo is. And it's more of a group situation face-off at the end where this individual that Kylo's been training maybe has an opportunity to take out Rey, but Kylo steps in from that happening, and we end up having some type of resolution in that moment. All right, and then Misuki goes on to say, I'm trying not to read negative stuff because I'm happy liking Rey and Kylo/Ben together, even though I'm not expecting them to have a typical happy ending, even if JJ goes that way. I just want to see more than them plotting and fighting. Thanks for the reply. Well, and thanks for writing. All right, Aunt Vesuvi writes this. As to your question where I think these new movies are heading, I'm not sure yet. I do love the concept of Lucasfilm branching out and creating more content aimed at specific age groups, adults in particular, and perhaps even eventually tailoring productions to other more specific demographics. I'm going to watch them all anyways. It would be nice to see some innovative perspectives and revel in any array of stylistic tones. Yeah, when it comes to particularly what Rian Johnson is doing, I'm going to venture a guess that that's where we're going to see some wild stuff. I heard somebody comment, and maybe it might even be in one of the comments that I haven't gotten to yet, but somebody made a comment about how they think that Rian Johnson will actually focus on some type of alien race. Almost like, I guess the first thing that pops into my mind is Avatar and the big, giant, 10-foot-tall blue cat people. But that would be the central focus, using technology and having these individuals not be humans that are the protagonists of the film, but actually some type of alien race. How rad would it be if we had a story that centered around a bunch of Twi'leks? I think that would be amazing. All right, we have just enough time to squeak in a couple more comments here. Grand Admiral Bendu writes this. Dan and Dave, the Game of Thrones guys, are no doubt doing Mandos in the main saga timeline between episode 1 and 8, or anywhere during the Old Republic, or they're doing just some other Old Republic stories. Oh, here it goes. Grand Admiral Bendu was the one that mentioned this. Ryan's going to tell some story involving an alien species. I think they'll be his main characters. He's going to go buck wild with his trilogy. Yeah, I can see both. I can see all those things happening. I definitely think that the Game of Thrones guys are going to be going back into the past, into the way past. I think that's right up their alley. But I'm obviously saying that just because of the connection that it has with Game of Thrones, right? It just lends itself better to that. Gen X7 writes this. To answer your question, I think episode 9 wraps up the 9-part trilogy. Ryan's trilogy looks at the Old Republic, and the cartoons will be for kids. There was talk of a live-action series on the Disney Channel, which I think will focus on the gaps after 9 with Rey, Finn, and Kylo and a new generation of Jedi. That's the one that's being spearheaded by Jon Favreau. I think the Game of Thrones guys will focus on groups like the Knights of Ren, the Hutts, Black Sun, crime lords, and pirates, the underbelly of the galaxy, their influence throughout the trilogy series. I love that you're a collector, too. Me as well. I picked up the 6-inch Solo at Target. Very nice figs. Treat yourself someday to some SH Figuarts. Yeah, those are real nice. A bit pricey, but well worth it. All right, you know what? I changed my mind. We're going to go ahead and go a little bit longer. I was looking at the clock and I actually had more time than I thought. So we'll make this an extended edition and get to all of your listener feedback this week. All right, let's double back to Amanda because she had quite a few comments here and I didn't get a chance to get to all of them. We'll work through the other comments from you guys. And thanks again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, at My Nerd World on Twitter, at Jon Justice on Twitter as well. Amanda writes this. Talking about my fandom. During the 70s and 80s, my dad's job was a distributor agent for the die-cast models and you-build-it kits of the Falcon, the TIE Fighters, and the X-Wings. That's awesome. He jokes that Star Wars kept me in diapers. One time, he met David Prowse and had him sign posters for his kids. I was a baby, so he taped that poster of Vader over my crib with the words, "Mandy, may the Force be with you," signed David Prowse. Sadly, the fate of that poster is our family's Star Wars Christmas trauma. My mom, unaware of their importance, threw them away when we moved. Oh my goodness. But to me, I felt like that poster, that heritage, nailed part of my destiny on a wall as my infant eyes stared up to gaze at Vader's face. I love stories in literature, mythology, and drama, and all who read or hear my comments forgive my constant flow of analysis, but that's what I've been trained to do. Analyze the story for plot and character development, especially for teaching morality, virtue, and theme. And I know I love that love originated while watching Star Wars as a kid. The most clear and memorable cinematic experience from my childhood was the conflict between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. It was a scene of intense fear and intense redemption. It became my template for understanding to resist temptation and remain in hope. And it taught me mercy. And more importantly and accurately, it was an example of when mercy triumphed over justice. I'll see that end scene in The Last Jedi and remember my friends and I playing Star Wars and asking my mom to put my hair in little Leia buns like a sweet redheaded girl. It reminds me of the hope of good storytelling and seeds that remain in your character building. To me, the legacy of Luke Skywalker, one of mercy and compassion, is the legacy of Star Wars and its impact. Well said, as always, Amanda, and greatly appreciated for your comment. Bo Tay writes this. I would love if they made the next trilogy more adult. Like you, I'm not saying rated R, but perhaps focusing more on the characters and less on the war. What I mean is that perhaps focusing more on the dynamics between the characters, how the war has affected them, and like you said, their personal relationships. I think that there will still be a war and action scene since it's Star Wars, but that would maybe take a background role to the characters themselves. I know I personally like the movies better when we focus on the characters and how they feel about certain things and how they act, but that's just how I feel, though, and it'll probably go in a completely different direction. All right, one more, and then we'll get to wrapping things up here. I was waiting for the whole day, comes from Teeny243, for the show to come out and listen to it as I came back from work. This is now my official Monday highlight. Oh, thanks. Looking around the fandom, I find it interesting how many different stories people have to tell and how they fell in love with Star Wars. For me, incidentally, it wasn't quite love at first sight. I guess I must have watched the movies as a young kid, but they must not have left any lasting impression, especially since my father, therefore my brother and me as well, was more into Star Trek. Also, Star Wars wasn't as big a cultural phenomenon in Germany than it was here in the U.S., so I really only consciously watched the original trilogy again shortly before the prequels came out. And while I truly liked the original trilogy, it was the prequels that made me fall in love with the galaxy far, far away. Amen to that. That's awesome. And yes, I'm fully aware that the prequel trilogy has its weaknesses, but the overall story, the vastness of the world building, the depth of the mythology, and especially the intricate political plot lines delighted and awed me. To this day, if someone asks me how a dictator can overthrow a democracy, I say, watch the Star Wars prequels. It's all there. When my daughters were old enough, we watched Star Wars together, beginning with The Phantom Menace, not A New Hope. And seeing the movies through the eyes of my children was another thrilling experience. As prequel fans, TFA was actually a bit of a letdown for us. We did enjoy it for what it was, but the prequel trilogy might have been a bit heavy on the politics. TFA gave us no political background at all. TFA felt as if it was trying to make us forget the prequel trilogy existed. Not a happy feeling for us. One of the many reasons I love The Last Jedi so much, and that it actually acknowledges the prequel trilogy in visual storytelling. The overhead shot of Kylo marching into the crate base is one that they put in parentheses here. And actually acknowledges the prequel trilogy in visual storytelling. I'm sorry, I got those backwards. So what I'm getting at is, just as you said, the Star Wars fandom has long since stopped being, or never has been, a very homogenous mass of people. Every one of us enjoys different aspects of it, I think. If Disney is smart, and I think they are, they will try to make the content that tries to please different parts of the fan base. Maybe there will be standalone movies with strong ties to the saga to delight more hardcore fans. There will be more emotional storylines, although when it comes to Reylo, I see a lot of male Reylo supporters around. And maybe, thinking of the Game of Thrones guys, darker and more mature stories. We will hopefully keep the animated series more aimed at children with those important moral messages that George Lucas wants to tell. At least that is what I would wish for. Thanks for bringing us the show every week. I'm always looking forward to it. Thanks for the comment, Teeny. I really do appreciate it. You know, the prequel trilogy gets a lot of criticism, unjustifiably in my mind. Well, okay, I won't say that. It gets a lot of criticism that I don't agree with. And again, you can highlight the weaknesses in all the movies. I mean, look, if you want to look at movies that have the most plot holes, go back and look at the original trilogy. I mean, that whole trilogy is filled with plot holes. Those movies never would have survived the scrutiny that we deal with today. They just wouldn't. But the prequel trilogy is an incredible set of movies. They really are. And if it hadn't been for what, in my opinion, if it hadn't been for what George Lucas did with those movies, especially Attack of the Clones, with the risks that he took when it comes to the special effects and the world building that he did, I don't think you get your Avengers Infinity War. I really don't. Those movies are heavy on the CGI, and it's clearly CGI. It looks great, but in retrospect, even though there's some wonky scenes in the prequel trilogy, there's certainly some wonky background paintings in the some wonky CGI in the prequel trilogy and some wonky matte paintings in the original trilogy. What George Lucas did with those movies is fantastic. There's a richness to the galaxy in those movies that is not in The Force Awakens and isn't even apart from Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. That's not to say they need it, but it is just to say that George Lucas really went out of his way to create some really dense, rich environments and expand the universe in a way that the two sequel trilogies that we've gotten so far have not done. That's why I'm so excited for these other movies that are being made, because I think it's going to afford the opportunity for a lot of these directors to go and do the things that George Lucas did. I feel like Disney and Lucasfilm, they obviously are making a very conscious choice to wrap up these 9 films and try to keep a common thread, but the threads with the sequel trilogy are more closely aligned with that of the original trilogy than they are, obviously, of the prequel trilogy. Even though I do believe Rian Johnson dipped his toe in there, because it's one of the things I love about the Canto Bight sequence is that it really reminds me of the prequel trilogy, and I love that father erase. All right, I'm sorry. I thought we were done. I do have one more to share with you. It's kind of lengthy, but we'll work through it. From Riviera writes this. You present a very interesting and uplifting show. Thank you. Thank you for your time and efforts. Thank you for writing. Very interested to see how 9 will end. They say that this one will bring all the movies together, whatever that means. But if we're going on a different route, then it would be logical for the ending to be some type of ceasefire instead of one of them winning and the other losing. That's really interesting. That has been the theme for all the movies so far, and it's getting them nowhere. All right, let me stop here real quick, and just because we're nearing the end of this week's show, let me just reiterate my comment from last week, because I feel bad. I do think there will be some type of continued connection between Rey and Kylo in 9. I just don't think it's going to be covered to the extent that it was in Episode 8. Okay, I was mistaken when I said that JJ won't touch the romance part of it. That's not what I meant. I just meant that it's not going to be thematically the focal point, whereas The Last Jedi, in my opinion, was. And that if we don't get that in 9, we'll always have The Last Jedi. Just wanted to clarify that. All right, more of Rivera's comments here. As to the relationship between Kylo and Rey, in my opinion, is definitely on the romantic physical attraction side. If they end up as a couple in 9, that remains to be seen. But J.J. Abrams has a lot of material to make the tension between these two even more interesting than before. For Kylo Ren, his redemption depends on the story of 9. Is his redemption actually necessary? I'm personally fascinated by this character, who seems to be damaged beyond repair, but that's what makes this story so interesting. I keep comparing Kylo Ren to another character from a completely different movie, and that's Maleficent in the Disney film, played by Angelina Jolie. It's the adult version of Sleeping Beauty, where we see the story through the eyes of the villain. I don't know if you've seen it. I have. I love that movie. Different, but I like what they did. Maleficent starts, spoiler alert, as a very powerful but good fairy who was betrayed by someone she really loved. The man cut off her wings while she was sleeping. Cutting off her wings was something I interpreted as preventing someone from being their true self, maybe for our own benefit or for what we think is the greater good for all. Regardless of the intention, this type of abuse has the potential of damaging a person for the rest of their lives. And I'm inclined to think that this is part of Ben Solo's problem. I don't think he wanted to be a Jedi in the first place. This is something that was decided for him. Oh, that's interesting. For Maleficent, her betrayal was too much for her, and she did all she could do to destroy this man who later became the king, whose daughter is Sleeping Beauty in the movie. However, the time she grew to love the girl in a motherly way, and unable to reverse the curse she put on her, decides to put her hatred aside and make the decision of dedicating her life to protect the girl. I think this is more or less the message that Disney is trying to bring to the public. Not just someone turning from bad to good, but someone who, despite the hatred and fears and the pain that they have, a moment of clarity and decide to do the right thing. This is also what I think happened to Vader. He didn't turn good in an instant, but seeing his son dying by the hands of Palpatine had a profound effect on him, creating in him a moment of clarity, motivating him to save his son at the end. He didn't do it looking for redemption, or that he would be Anakin again. That was the natural outcome of this decision. Saving his son was for him to do the right thing. Sorry for the long email. Keep up the good work. Rivera. No, man, thank you so much for the long email. I really do appreciate it. And those are fantastic thoughts from everybody who wrote in this week. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for not giving me too hard of a time last week. If you could see the way I do the show, I really do shoot from the hip. And I do that intentionally. I have a genuine love and fascination for Star Wars, right? I don't think there's it's funny. I've got 2 BB-8s. I've got 2 Spiro BB-8s. And the one to my right, he's moving around. He always does it every time I'm doing the show. It's really comical. I just looked over and BB-8's head's looking at me and nodding. It's creepy and weird. Sorry. Anyway, I do a loose list of notes for the show every week, and then if I can be, I don't know what the word, schmaltzy for a moment, I just speak from my heart. That's just what I do. I see where the road's going to take me in the hour to hour and 20 minutes that I do the show every week, and sometimes it lends itself to some circular conversations, and oftentimes it leads to me misspeaking. So if you feel like I've gone astray, don't be too critical, because I don't like the criticism. Just kidding. But anyways, if you feel like I've misspoken on something, or maybe haven't clarified a point, just ask me and I'll do it. That's the way I like to do the show. That's what keeps it interesting for me. I like to really have it be a looser show every week where I'm just pulling my genuine reaction to things. And you have become a huge, huge part of that. And I cannot thank you enough every single week for sending me in your comments. I really do appreciate it. And with that, we wrap up another show. We'll be back again next week, counting down to Solo here. Less than a month to go, man. And I'm so excited for this film. As always, drop me an email. talkshownerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the YouTube page. I'll pull it up and we will talk again next week. Podbean, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher. I'm missing one. Oh, and YouTube is where you can find the show. Tell your friends about it, please. I continue to try to grow the show. And through your help of letting people know that like to listen to Star Wars podcasts, that's been really, really beneficial to growing the show every week. So I hope you do have yourself a fantastic week. And if you want to comment on Infinity War too, again, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And until then, we will, I guess, just have yourself a great week, right? Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.